Hello, I'm Roger Heaton, clarinettist. We've just finished recording Mihailo's clarinet quintet here in a church in North London. It's a terrific piece that I commissioned in 2011. Yes, 2011. I worked quite a lot with the Kreutzer Quartet, so we've done quite a lot of work together, Bird Whistle Quintet and other things like that. And I'd heard some of Mihailo's music before. It's very particular kind of music that's to do with sound worlds, textures, and different kinds of techniques that look at the harmonics, not only of strings but of wind, woodwind as well. It's got a funny title though. What does the title mean? Magnets, Lava, Crystals.
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. Well, actually, the title came after I'd finished the piece. I would say it has to do partly with the actual compositional process, and partly with the material. So it has sort of two purposes, the title. Especially in the last, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 years, I've been working in this sort of way. A lot of the initial stages have to do with very fast and very intense work on the material. Mm-hmm. That way I feel it sort of generates momentum, and I feel this influences the material itself. There are certain sort of magnetic pulls within it that appear because of it. If I can maintain that kind of momentum, I can feel the magnetic pulls in the music, and it makes me feel that I can control the material as it develops in time. And then after the initial period, after which I suppose I have the skeleton there is a sort of hoover that goes from the beginning to the end of the piece, and that takes a lot longer, in fact, than the actual writing of the music, where I check all the details, and in fact I go a few times through the piece. So some of it has to do with just checking all the harmonies and rhythms and so on, and the way the structure sort of unfolds. And then a lot of it has to do with specific colors, and because in this piece they're very important. In terms of the writing for strings, a lot of it has to do with the very specific indications about bowing techniques, about fingerings, and so on. Mm. And this process feels to me like a sort of crystallization. At the end of it, it feels like this initial outpouring of material has crystallized, and it very much has that kind of form. I feel that in time it appears as a sort of crystallized entity, I suppose I would say. In this piece there are a few skeletons. The first one is a harmonic series that's based on C. And then at the same time I have another skeleton which is based around perfect fifths, which is the tuning of the quartet. And these I feel are sort of gravitational points. There's a lot of quartertones that appear throughout the piece, and these have to do with sort of obscuring the gravitational points. So it's basically, I suppose I would say, they create tension. And then going back to the gravitational points is a certain kind of release. And I very much feel that this is sort of, magnetic pulling and pushing within the material. And as I said, I feel that this generates a kind of momentum in the material that, especially in the middle section of the piece, ends up with, in some ways, a huge eruption. And the analogy of that is really just like a volcanic eruption. The crystallization process, as I said, has to do with the structure of the piece. It also has to do with the way I feel sound crystallizes from the fundamental to all the partials. First of all, in terms of small sections, and in terms of how sounds are arranged vertically, but second of all, horizontally as well. As the material develops, I feel it creates a certain kind of crystallization of the musical language. I think overall I would say that the C harmonic series is the main starting point, because of course the open fifths can be found within that, and then quarter tones within that, and so on. But what I find interesting is how, from equal temper tuning, when you deviate certain, when you move certain number of the harmonics, how it gets very close. Of course, with string instruments, this is very idiomatic, so you can very easily deviate and get to the harmonic series. But at the same time, the quarter tone movement, I play with the tension that the quarter tone movement creates in relation to equal temper tuning. So I suppose there is an overriding skeleton that's based on the harmonic series, and within that, there are different kind of hierarchies that appear.
Certainly from a clarinettist's point of view, it's a piece that we sort of quasi-collaborated on, didn't we, I guess? And it has some very tricky moments in it, mainly to do with extremes of register. There are a couple of multiphonics that are to be played very, very loud. And one of them has a top C, a written top C on it. The other one has an F sharp, you know, they are quite different. Those multiphonic things, because also later on in the piece there are some chains of very, very quiet ones, and always with playing multiphonics, it's this idea of balancing the two, the top and bottom. Pitch and at these extremes of dynamics as well. Having said that, it's very much a clarinettist's piece. It's written for the clarinet. There's no two ways about it. It works very, very well. But I know that you haven't written for the clarinet before, and I just wondered how you kind of got into that, apart from me asking you to write it, of course.
Well, I have written a little bit for the clarinet, but not in this sort of way, I have to say. I think, I mean, when you asked me to write the piece, I suppose in the last few years I've worked more and more like this, and with every piece now I do this. When somebody asks me to write something, I spend quite a bit of time, I suppose you would say researching, but in some ways I feel it's sort of building a library in my, in my brain, really. So part of it had to do with the specific connection with you. We did that festival in Cyprus, didn't we, which is when we first started playing together, and then or was it was before that at Bath Spa we did that workshop, so you'd heard some of my music and so on. But through some of the conversations, first of all with you, I got some sense of what you find interesting in 20th century and contemporary music. And actually, I kind of discovered we have some shared interests, like Chelsea, for example.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
You know, actually, Radulescu too, I think. And so, although we didn't actually specifically talk about that. And then I read your chapter in the Cambridge Companion to the Clarinet and asked you to suggest a few other sources that I could consult for extended techniques, and especially multiphonics I was interested in, I think, and how practical quarter tones would be, tremolos as well, although that's, I mean, maybe it's less risky, I suppose, if you know what you're doing in terms of the register. But the multiphonics, that took a little bit of time to research, I think. And then I went and listened to a lot of music, again, some of it suggested in your chapter and on the contemporary clarinet. And that, I feel that kind of built a library in my head for the clarinet and for the kind of context that I wanted to build for this piece in terms of the communication between the clarinet and the quartet. And also, I suppose I discovered a way in which I could somehow bring in the clarinet to what I was kind of interested in doing, what I'd started doing in previous pieces in terms of string sound and so on. But I would say definitely it has a lot to do with you, even though we didn't physically sit down a lot and work on it. I feel that I found out a lot about you and about your interest. And really, I feel with every piece, actually, that's, for me, it kind of has to be like that. It has to be that it's a collaboration. It has to feel that I'm flexible enough so that I can do something that everybody is interested in. That's part of it. It seems to me that it's the only way it makes sense. Anyway.
And I think it's a terrific piece because it does the kinds of things that I'm interested in. It's all about the instrument. It's all about what the different sounds you can get out of the instrument, and even the kind of fabric of the instrument as well.
Yeah.
And I like all of that. I think that's.
I think
that's
similarly
great.
for the strings, I think as well. Obviously, I'm very closely connected to the string world, I feel, you know, and I always have the violin there, and I can always try out things, and if I want to stretch things in terms of technique and so on, I can always see what's practical, and I can always bring it, even if it's the cello, I can always bring something to a rehearsal and ask Neil and so on. But with you, I couldn't do that as much. I had to do a lot more actually proper research and looking at the construction of the instrument and that sort of thing. So it was kind of an interesting kind of combination of different approaches, I suppose I would say.